Alrighty then, so welcome to another session with me. Today we have enormous amount of different topics to cover, and I even tried to squeeze in an additional, as I think you would need some guidance with the game design documents. So today I will be, if possible, even more of a talking head that just keeps on going than before. So bear with me this time as we cover design pillars, unique selling point, comparative analysis, a little touch of positioning, and hopefully we have some time to go to game design documents. If the last part we won't have time, then that will be the topic for next session. But hopefully in one-on-one meetings that we are to have, I will try to give you guidance on how to build a game design document that helps you also scale the project and plan the project so that when the Q2 starts, you're ready to start regular sprints, regular development, and so forth. But without further ado, let me once again remind me what I feel is the biggest pitfall that I see game companies and startup teams face, which is that they develop a great game that they're really passionate about, and in the end, the result is that no one really is interested. And there are, as you know, a lot of ways how to predict if that would be the case, maybe even prevent by making changes early on. And out of those topics that I have hinted in my previous sessions, today's topics will cover unique selling points. Basically meaning that you should only make games that deserve to be made. Already on Steam alone, 50 new games come out every day. There is 700,000 games on itch.io, so make games that deserve to be made. So I tend to start this session with reminding that publishers are really easy partners because they really focus on the three things that matter within a project, and they have the skills and abilities to push the marketing side, sometimes even make or break the success cases of any individual game. They review over 1,000 games every year, most publishers do, and then they say maybe 10 times yes to a publishing deal. So that is the kind of scale how good you really need to be in order to get your game published by a publisher. But the three things that you need to have convincing ways to get them say yes. You can, of course, make a self-publishing games, but then you need to handle the elements what publishers handle. Is basically the primary thing is that is the game worth doing? Is the game going to be fun? Is it exciting? Are you passionate about it? And the second thing is that are they convinced that you can do it? Today's topics, GDD, will be one key element on convincing, can you really do it? Can you scale it so that it is doable within the time limit and resources you have? And last week we already handled the topic that can the publisher sell enough copies for it to make sense to publish exactly this game. But an overview, basically, okay, I have some animations on my slide. Let me try to get rid of them. No, I can't. Well, basically, to start with the most important topics is that you need to communicate why your game matters. And why your game would matter is that your game needs to provide... Okay, there is some weird timings on it. Oh, sorry about this. Use timings was on. I don't know why I had clicked on that. Okay. getting back to the topic. So indeed, what kind of attitude you should have is that for specific players, your game needs to be the best in the world. It doesn't need to be best overall game, but from specific angle that no other game does this thing as excitingly as as your game. This is the reason why someone will buy your game and why they will help spread the word by talking about it to their friends. And I remind you that even outside games, 20% of your best customer will drive 80% of your sales. Is what is with clothes or smartwatches or whatnot. And from mobile games, we have every reason to believe that this is even more drastic in video games. Not necessarily talking about whales in free-to-play games, but rather that you really need to make games that get people excited, because somehow you need to pull yourself above the 49 other games that are launched on the very same day that your game launches. The logic, of course, is that if someone gets excited about your game, then they want to see it being a success, and then they will spread the word. And typically when people have been researched, one of the best recommendations, most effective, is word of mouth. If someone you trust recommends a game, you're more likely to buy it than if it's just an advert that you see, even if that advert would be a game magazine. Sure, game magazine might be something that people trust more than adverts, but in any case, make something that gets people excited. So how do we know how your game makes how your game would be best for someone else? One thing is positioning. Positioning meaning that it's kind of like this, but with the element of that. We're gonna see some examples of this. My favorite tool is doing comparative analysis, comparing it to the most likely game where your players are, and then analyzing that, okay, we win that dominant game on this element, but we're going to lose on these elements. So let's focus on making that one bit better than even the more dominant, bigger game that is out there. And all these should help you get your unique selling points, which is more of the not necessarily slogan. It can be a slogan, but the one thing or few things that really set that game apart. When I started my career in LV project and gurus talked to me, they said that you should start your design by designing the box, because back then games were sold in a box. That helps finalizing also your unique selling point. Nowadays, I would transfer that you should start your design by writing your Steam page first, because that means that these are the elements that need to be at the forefront of your development. That also helps you establish why your game matters, and it's an easy exercise because basically you have 100,000 examples to look. What do the other games put out in front? And then experimenting how you could also differentiate from competition. Now, innovation is what helps you create the unique selling points, how to create experiences that not other games offer, that your game won't be 13th game in a dozen. But indeed, it's not easy to develop very innovative games that wouldn't conflict with the topics that I talked in my first session, which is the cognitive capabilities of the player. If everything is totally far out there, if there is nothing familiar in a video game, it's not the same as being totally far out there movie or book. You can still read a book and 100% of your brain capacity is in identifying with the characters. following the plot and so forth. But with games, most of the brain capacity is on figuring out how to operate that game, which means that immersion starts appearing only once you feel like, okay, now I know what each button does. So don't go too niched or too far out there unless you're making arty game that only needs to bring money for your own salary. Tried and true is good in the sense that at least then you can trust that players are already familiar with these mechanics. But try to innovate by changing some of the premises that it would be a new experience. So reinventing the wheel isn't really desirable or smart. That means that you're hurting the brain capacity where players use that, as well as you're making life more difficult for yourself by figuring out how should this game mechanic work. So in order to be able to provide experience that somehow sets itself apart from competition while still not being the overly difficult to do, comparative analysis to the closest competitors is a smart thing to do. So jumping to comparative analysis is the first step. First step there is to figure out what game, hopefully very, very successful game, is closest to your game, why are the players playing it, and why they could try out your game as well. Once again, I remind also that there are games like MMOs, which the other players are the content, and if game is a game as a service, kind of like a subscription-based or free-to-play game, then people are not willing to change the experience. They are locked into that game, so even being objectively better won't help. Luckily, if you are making a premium game with start and an end, those games have players try out also new games. So then figuring out, once those players have finalized something, why would they choose your game next? So comparative analysis, it should be the king of your genre, or close to being the king of the genre. And if you're aiming for genre mixture type of game, that okay, RPG and a base builder, then use two games as a comparative analysis. That, well, it's fresh and new for players on this genre because of, or this game thanks to these, and then for the other game for other reasons. And then you start comparing on a high level, and I'll show you how. But before that, I want to emphasize that you should be specific and analytical when doing the comparative analysis. You should dive deep into the other game and how its features, how its story, how its levels work, so that you could highlight something concrete, and those would be actionable, that hey, here is something where we can be even better than this dominant game. So main purpose is to take dominant players, and then those games should be the games where journalists or players, influencers, and others are going to compare your game, even if they are bigger. That this is a poor man's XCOM, or this is a The Sims, but with a fraction of its budget, or whatever. Wherever you would like your players lie, you need to be better from a specific angle. So don't do comparative analysis to niche indie games that has sold only 10,000 copies. You most likely, when you're running a company, you need to sell more than 10,000 copies. If you're a solo developer, 10,000 copies can be a good result. For a professional team, that's way too little. You're going to get bankrupt if you only sell that much. And in any case, most people won't try your game. So if, as long as some players get excited and they are playing something familiar, then that is a reason why some of them might find your game. So once you have established one or two rivals, then start comparing. Compare the features, compare the visual style, the mood, complexity, monetization, and so forth. So, in reality, it probably makes sense to create segments, not just randomly comparing, but rather that, okay, meta gameplay works like this. Are we going to have more interesting meta gameplay or not? Maybe our strength lies in core gameplay. Once again, meta meaning what keeps the players continue playing. Core is where players spend most of the time, more of the every moment-to-moment gameplay. Meta, more of the progression mechanics. So once you've covered the meta, then compare the core gameplay. If you are making a free-to-play game, then compare the monetization. And if you're working on a very story-driven game, maybe then compare the stories. Why this would appeal to the players better because of some elements. Like whatever is relevant to your game. Same topic, by the way, when writing a game design document, it needs to also answer to topics that are relevant to your game. Now, as comparative analysis is actionable document that helps you realize where your strength lies, you shouldn't then sugarcoat things. You shouldn't be utopistic that, okay, sure, we can beat them on this thing that is at the heart of that well done, very successful game. Rather, you should be honest. You should find your game concept strengths against them, where you will beat them, and admit that you will have less money, less time, so you won't beat them everywhere. And it's perfectly fine. That's about knowing which elements you should focus while developing the game. Ideally, of course, you keep in mind the target audience that you already hopefully have done. If you know you're making your game for gladiators or bounty hunters, skirmishers, or whatnot, then make sure that where you beat that well-done rival serves the motivations that your players actually care. So reflect back to the previous exercises as well. The results will also highlight your marketing angles. That it's perfectly fine that maybe in 90% of the cases you're worse than the market leader where most of the players are, but then 10% of your game is actually better. So then you focus on those elements. Now, before I show some examples, I want to emphasize also that expanding comparative analysis might be smart to also expand into SWOT analysis. SWOT meaning analyzing the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that your game project has. So this will basically give you elements to bring up other elements that's not just about the game. There might be some key opportunities elsewhere. So then adding those into the same document or a separate document if you wish. In SWOT analysis, though, I wouldn't just compare to the main rival or main rivals. I would look at the SWOT analysis separately, so the immediate surroundings. So if SWOT analysis isn't familiar to some of you, then it's about both internal and external stuff. So first the inner things, meaning that what you do, what about your game or team, then focusing on the strengths. That our game solves this issue that many of the games in this genre has, or our team has done something similar before. weaknesses of your game or team, that okay, we realize that we're going to focus on just this core element, so the meta game will suck in our game, that we know that that's not going to be as strong as with the rivals, for example. And then external elements, maybe there is some opportunities that your game might have that isn't really about the game. That like one example was many years ago that skateboarding was about to become Olympic sports, and as such there would be a big demand for skateboarding games. So one of the teams that I mentored cleverly saw that this is a clear external opportunity for the game when the Summer Olympics take place, that now there is skateboarding in a new prestigious level. And then external threats, that there might be, and there probably is, can be drowning in competition, or can be that maybe this Balatro thing is already popping up, so maybe the Balatro dies, maybe someone else has the same idea. So that could be external threat, that our innovative mechanics won't stay as innovative. Next, since I do want to cover enormous amount of topics, I will run relatively fast, but you will get the recording as well as the slides, so you can look at them on your own time. Some examples of comparative analysis. Back in the day when we did Company of Crime, turn-based tactical strategy game about organized crime, we were asked to provide a game concept for the same audience, and we came up with a bootlegger tycoon, so more business-oriented game instead of tactical. And here is the comparative analysis to the two very famous type of games where we highlighted how are we different, or that would have been different. Cool concept, but then we didn't push it that much further. This comparative analysis ended up being signed. So Prodomo became Great House of Calderia. We knew that, okay, Crusader Kings 3 is the main rival, and that's hardcore medieval simulation game, and we were aiming for mid-core fictional strategy game, more Renaissance inspired, and so forth. There is lots of different elements. Maybe I highlight that fans of Crusader Kings knows that it's mostly looking at a map, and on top of that map there is pop-up windows. Well, Great House of Calderia has three major views in the game that prompt different activity, from gamifying negotiations as well as battles, and then also handling your own fiefdom in its own separate gameplay elements, and then sure, map view as well. Now, where it really excelled, this exercise, was back in Company of Crime. That was my previous game company's maiden game. We had super strong unique selling points. It was supposed to be very unique. Turn-based tactical strategy game about organized crime. But then John Romero from Romero Games and Paradox, with 20 times more resources, announced Empire of Sin before our game had been announced. So we, of course, then started analyzing that, okay, what are they saying about Empire of Sin, and where is our fighting chance against the legends that made Doom and Wolfenstein 3D and others. And the publisher is enormously bigger than what we had. So we did like a strategy layer comparison. We thought we would be losing there. Sadly, though, Empire of Sin flopped, so we didn't lose here, but we were ready that, okay, fine, strategic layer. If we need to cut, we cut here, because it seems that their main strength lies on this element. And then in tactical layer, we realized that they have 0 unique selling points there. We're going to wipe the floor on this side. So let's make sure that we do wipe the floor of them on this side. And we did. And then general comparisons. They aimed for short gameplay, huge playability. So we emphasized that, okay, let's then put more longer gameplay, but that's fine. Then limited replayability so that we at least win on a specific angle then. That might have been a mistake, but we couldn't know that Empire of Sin would flop. And then pros and cons. What are Empire of Sin's pros? What are its cons? What are our pros? And what are our pros and what are our cons? And last but not least, the SWOT analysis as well. But I let you read all these later on. Now, game pillars or design pillars, as previously mentioned, they will be there to let everyone know that you know what you're doing. It should help you find the true north of your game, so help the team building player motivation analysis that we did. That also should help you realize that everyone is making the same type of game, that not one is pulling to different direction because of whatever personal emotions they might have. But when you establish design pillars, everyone knows that, okay, this is the vision for the game, and if I'm suggesting something or I'm making micro decisions, I should always aim towards those pillars. It is there to minimize the iteration needs, so that you get most bang for the buck. So basically, we always will have limited time to make a game, so every time you have to throw something out of the window means that you could have made a bigger game or made a game that had more polish time and so forth. So design pillars is there to help that. So what are those? Well, they are indeed foundations of the game concept upon which you start building the game experience. They should be your guidelines whenever you're designing new features or developing content, deciding plot points, deciding how the enemies will look like and whatnot. They kind of guide you to different directions. And they should be your reference points when you're thinking of details within the implementation. And last but not least, they shouldn't be bland or vague or general, but very specific and emotion invoking. They should convey what the game is about, and they should be remembered and pushed through all the time. Let's take a couple of examples, not my own, but stolen examples by others. So let's say that your game has violence in it. But what type of violence? Here is 2 conflicting design pillars when it comes to violence. It could be extremely violent and bloody combat, that people don't just die, but they explode into pieces. There is blood everywhere, and so forth. This guides everyone. Artists know that, okay, when I'm modeling a character, limbs need to be able to go off, and lots of particle effects and blood spilling from recognizable places. That's how I need to do my job. But if the game has the violence being more elegant, tactical stealth combat, where darkness is your friend, and you need to sneak from one safe place to another, and then kill in a silent way, level designer knows that, okay, how do I make good levels? Well, there needs to be dark places, there needs to be places where to hide bodies and so forth. So totally different guidelines, totally different micro decisions during development. First one, no need to hide bodies, everyone explodes and there is blood everywhere. On the other element, any blood spillings is an enemy, basically. And then a Finnish example, what has been said to have been the design pillars for Cities in Motion 1, creative replayability, system-driven simulation, accessible, right production values, and grounded in reality. So to highlight that this is exactly the same exercise where we've spent 3 days, well, sure, not full days, but long meetings on 3 different days to establish design pillars for our first game in Silver Legend. And we're making, if someone hasn't heard, a kind of character management RPG in the sense of Band of Brothers meets The Sims. So it's more about the social aspects of your survivors as they live in a violent post-apocalyptic world where aliens are stuck on orbit of the Earth and humanity has lost control of the planet. And for us in that game, our design pillars are which guide our micro decisions, that we are building meaningful character-driven relationships. There would be do's and don'ts and more like descriptive sentences there as well. But I'm saving some time. We want characters to react to the world, which ties that they need to be aware of what goes on. So if it shouldn't be just characters dropped on the world, but they need to be aware of those. We know that each playthrough should unlock more of the world, lore-wise, what has happened, and so forth. So it's fine that we hide elements that not all players will see, at least not with one playthrough. And then there is bite-sized high-stake encounters with squad dynamics, maybe the least well-established one, or quite long, but it basically means that the meaningful character-driven relationship needs to take place also when violence starts happening. And then when it comes to mood, tempo, and everything, we emphasize the tension between hope and despair. So there is now design pillars. Covered comparative analysis. We still have time. Maybe we have time for also the game design documents. But let's first check positioning. Positioning will also help you communicate your key elements from more broad picture. For example, once again, live examples. Not yet, means that you can help establish the tone, how your game is talked of, and how something your game is. Helps with marketing, but also helps with design work just as well. For example, combining strategy and story at the XY coordinates. One could be that this game requires more strategic thinking than Banner Saga, but less than XCOM, but it is more story-driven than XCOM, but less so than Banner Saga. Positioning is always done compared to other well-known games, and it should help you find empty spaces where there isn't as much competition. It's also one way to make sure that people would be interested in your game. For example, Lake Toba, one of my favorite concepts, which I still hope I get to make, and which has been 3 times very close to be signed with multi-million euro budget, but sadly has failed at the chalk lines. Its positioning is this, or one of the positionings. So in 4X strategy games, it tends to be that all factions are the same, and only on Endless Legend all factions are different. Well, Lake Toba would be another game where all factions are different. Then why it makes sense is that, okay, Endless Legend is fantasy 4X game, and historical 4X games are more of the thing, and their Old World and Humankind are very historical. Lake Toba would aim to be as historical as Civilization, but compared to the other three there in Lake Toba, all factions are different. Or to highlight what I'm making currently myself, here is the different positionings for the Grey Legend Survivors, our first game which I mentioned. So having power fantasy or no power fantasy, no social fantasy or having some social fantasy, and reflecting where other games where our players are, that we are in a relatively non-competed space. Another way to look at it is how deep player-generated characters are, or are the characters more designer-created or stock characters, and is the game being shown via violent gameplay or peaceful gameplay, and then some explanation text for it. Let me leave it more for the recording also. And last but not least, positioning when it comes to delivering designer story or player story and having gaming mechanics or very system soup. Oh, I miscopied the system soup. So the top there is more system soup elements. So not always they need to be the XY coordinates, like here the triangular shape made more sense. Now, back to the unique selling points. They are your most defining elements of your game. They help everyone communicate why your game is different from other games and why you should give it a shot. Comparative analysis, I feel, tends to reveal most what makes your game fun, but positioning as well as the design pillars should emphasize also that you're aiming for something worth doing. And I dare say that unique selling points are the main reason why your game deserves to exist. 50 games every day, 100,000 games already in Steam, 1 million games already in mobile devices. Why the world needs one more game? Because of your unique selling points. So unique selling points is in marketing, but it should be vital also in development that at least the key unique selling point you will be delivering as well. Because your unique selling points must be true. It's fine if you have multiple key selling points and one unique selling point. So typically if you're working with publishers, one mind-blowing unique selling point is enough, and then together with the marketing team you say that there is more of them, but the others might be more of key selling points, not unique selling point, but try to have at least one unique selling point, because unique selling points help marketing, developing, and getting funded. For example, the Company of Crime, as I think I mentioned previously, we didn't even need to have a demo, and it was a fresh company. We hadn't developed a game before. Sure, we bootstrapped and we had an experienced team, but being first XCOM style game that makes melee as ballsy as shooting with guns, that was our main unique selling point. Helped sell the game. Noita, sure, didn't need to have a publisher, but if it would have been, platformers are among the worst genre there is, but their unique selling point being the first platformer where every pixel is simulated, they might as well have gotten funded as well if they hadn't made successful games before, but that one is a super strong unique selling point. And last but not least, my previous game, Great House of Calderia, was a story generator grand strategy where you play through the epic moments instead of watching them, at direct pinpoint how to differentiate from Crusader Kings, which was the closest rival where we wanted some of the players to come play that game. Now, final thoughts on this. You should think differently. If you're making a 13th game in a dozen, nobody will care. You will be stuck with a few wish lists and no sales, and will end up in exactly where I started this lecture, having a great game that's fun to play, but no one really cares about it. So tiny tweaks on successful games will always have better funded, more experienced teams that have more time to do exactly what you aim to do. And I like analyzing why some games are, or particularly runaway hits, why they become a runaway hit. And usually, even on those cases, it's what they did differently, what made them successful, rather than the fact that they did some elements very similarly to the standards of that genre. So if you have unique selling points, then you have arguments why even in a very crowded, unviable genre, you could be the outlier, why you could be the Noita in platformers, or why you could be the different roguelike in a very competitive genre. So try to find your unique selling points. So to sum this session as well as the previous ones, when you're developing a game, you should have all these aligned. So you should have a unique selling point that provides experience what other games don't, and it doesn't have to be totally far out there. It could be that, in other games, it's range shots that is the key, and for once we make it as tactical from melee distance. That is enough. Then what you need to make sure is that your target audience actually wants those elements, that you're serving exactly the player motivations that your target audience wants. So they care about those unique selling points. The genre should be sustainable, that there is players playing these type of games, even if it's top heavy. If you have unique selling points and target audience wants, then you have arguments why you could be outlier. But of course, if the genre is sustainable, that even top 30 sales position actually means selling a lot of copies, then of course that's easier. And then your design pillars should be clearly built to sustain the previous three. And on top, you shouldn't compete directly to the genre's dominant game. There is a reason why they play that, so try to avoid fighting directly against that. Probably the dominant game has production values that we can't compete, so better come from slightly from an angle. Now, I quickly check on the chat, so if you have quick questions on these topics, then I will answer. Otherwise, I will jump straight into game design documents, which I want to cover as well. So, no questions, but Sami, thanks already. Then let's jump to the game design documents. So, first of all, game design documents should be a living document that helps you with the development tasks, helps creating those tasks as well as then specifying how that should be developed, whether it's art, mechanics, level design, whatever. Living document means that you shouldn't expect to write game design document at the beginning and then stop designing. And a good game design document deals what is important to your game. All game design documents need to deal with what are the mechanics that the player uses. As a good starting point, I would go back to the spreadsheet that I shared to you even before you started in the program. Go back to the verbs section and consider what are the verbs that player uses and what are the verbs that the game world, game characters, level designers can use to make the world more alive. But all of you are making different games, so the bigger some role for your end result has, the bigger its role should be in the actual game design documents as well. So if you're making a puzzle game, make sure that the puzzle structure, what are the tools, how to make interesting puzzles, are well covered in the game design document. If power progression leveling up is a big thing for your game, make sure that you deal with how experience points are earned, how the leveling system works, and so forth. So whatever is important to your game, that should be in the game design document. However, you shouldn't be afraid to split content to its own files, so that one file has the animations that is required, one has the skills that your character or enemy characters can use, one file for enemies, one for story, and so forth. Now, a quick look on GDDs in general. In like 10 years ago, there was a discussion, is time passing through game design documents? I personally, as a game designer, was puzzled with that topic. Back then, it was rise of mobile games and agile teams, and as such, kind of a monstrous game design document was a topic that when we're making agile decisions, should we waste time on documentations? However, I still want to emphasize that it wasn't about lack of design or if design documentation is relevant, but rather is one overarching game design document still relevant, or should it be exploded to lots of different places? Me, on my personal work, I've tried both spread out design documentation and game design documents, and I've personally found having at least some sort of core game design document clearly better. The challenge there is that if one game design document, I will show once again some examples, if you try to put core info in one file, of course, upkeeping that becomes a chore, and it's easier to keep individual files or individual snippets alive. Currently, I'm trying to adjust into making game design document into directly into linear, which we are using, which is like the same as Confluence. Personally, I've always hated Confluence, but in any case, like whatever format the game design document is, I feel that having a strong skeleton is better than just dealing with individual files. And at the same time, I feel that game design documentation has come back, that it is good to have the skeleton, because it was a weird discussion 10 years ago, and now I don't see that anymore in the game conferences. So what basically is a game design document? Typically, it is the most important design document dealing with the most important elements of that particular game. In case of walking simulators, story-driven games, or puzzle games, story documentation might be the most important, or puzzle documentation might be most important. Then you could argue that that's actually the game design document, even if it's narrative document. But in any case, let's take a few examples. What should be in the game design document. So just a few sentences which, like, let's say, non-designers tend to throw out. A player character stands idle, then it hits with a blacksmith. Blacksmith is knocked unconscious. The villagers panic and start fleeing and yelling for guards. Later, guards appear and start fighting the player character. Now, already this sentence has a lot of things what to design. So which mechanics and variables these instances or these sentences indicate? Well, if you write creative text like this, which shouldn't be how game design documentation is done, game design document isn't creative text. It's mechanical text. It's fine that it's boring as hell, and often diagrams, flowcharts, tables are better than a wall of text. But these sentences indicate the following. Okay, player mechanics, there is at least movement and attack. How do those work? Is it always the same speed? Do we have some button that makes the character run? How is that? Then there is at least health, because blacksmith didn't die, so some sort of health system. There needs to be damage output, damage style, meaning that, okay, blacksmith is not unconscious, not dead. Characters need to have status, because the blacksmith still is in the game. Status also meaning villagers, they panic and so forth. So all those need to be explained. How do they work? And then world mechanics, panic means a status where non-player characters move away from player characters' range. Status might be that they are yelling to alert guards, and there needs to be a hearing distance and some sort of mechanics how that guard responds to that yelling. Even on worst case, status can be that, okay, the guard run towards player character and then attack. So probably there is status at least of being friendly, being unconscious, being in panic, being aggressive, and being dead. And then probably line of sight, but that's hinted. There isn't direct result in those sentences that there is a line of sight. So if in any of your presentations you would be writing a sentence like this, example gameplay, these are the mechanics that you need to write in game design document. How do they work? Now, design in general, I want to emphasize once more that design is a process and it's technical writing. And when you're working in a team, try to avoid wall of text. It's intimidating. Use flowcharts and tables and infographics. That helps people understand what you're doing fast, and it doesn't force people to read a wall of text, which is particularly important because game design documents are not meant to be read from beginning to end, but they are meant to be searched for information. Hence, structure, headline numbering, links, those are very important elements. You shouldn't be building game design document like you're building a book, but rather that, okay, I need to know how to develop this element, or how is the vision for these levels or the puzzles or whatnot. So searching for the information. And if there is wall of text, it takes a lot of time to find the actual information, which makes it a chore and makes it more likely that other developers miss the important information. Last but not least is that grammar is important. So make sure that if something is written with a capital letter, it means that it's actually a gameplay term in your game. Hit points, or let's say health, that tends to be a gameplay term. If you use it as a gameplay term, then capitalize it. If you refer that you are using hit points and then just want to refer to how much health is or hit points is left, then use health in lowercase, meaning that everyone understands, even when they're quickly browsing, that's not important. It's hit points, not health. But if it's health that you can have 200 points of health, then capitalize it. And please avoid fluff. Fluff should have their own documents, and if you want to enliven the boring technical text, at least put it on italics so that everyone realizes that this bit is not important. This is just to get you into the mood, but mostly game design document is on guidelines. How are we making something work? So try not to put fluff in your design documentation. But once again, make sure that searching for information is as easy as possible. So put extra attention on titles, chapters, infographics, and so forth. And even when you hopefully spread your information on different files, using example tables for specific things is a good idea. If there is like a player character, then a table that it has movement speed, jumping height, health, and ability it can use, and what else? Well, it could be those 4 things. Then it already quick to see, probably there's other special abilities than just this example one listed. Okay, what are those? And then we know that, okay, movement speed is something that probably can be upgraded, or is it static? I don't know. Depends on the game. So speed, armor, health point, hit point, and so forth. Using these examples make it easier to show where variation comes in your game. That, okay, we are spawning lots of headless zombies, but then the stronger ones, well, instead of 1 hit point, they might have 20 hit points. That's a very different one. And their speed is just 2 instead of 10, so very different. Highlights via table, so much easier on the differences than writing a creative text that there is speedy, stupid zombies that are easy to kill, and then there is tank zombies, blah, blah, blah. But this would be in a wall of text. For browsing purposes, very difficult or very brain consuming to read through. So, but the example table instantly shows how you variate the experience. And last but not least is that you should understand that game design is a living process, and your end result is not the final game design document, but the final game. So most likely elements live until launch, or at least until the game is so far that everything that is in the game that needs to be polished can be seen. Then probably the design documentation can remain outdated, because you shouldn't update documentation when documentation is no longer needed, unless you're making DLCs or live operations and whatnot, which means that new recruits might join and they need to have a way to understand the game in a more core element, like a more deeper level. Then you should still keep updating the documentation as well. A bit more. Game design documentation is mostly internal tool to help with the development. So its format depends on the game, and it should focus on the most difficult things. The Captain Obvious things, of course, don't need as much focus as the difficult things do require. Meaning that for a story-driven game, your focus should be on player choice moments and how do you make them into meaningful moments. If there is puzzles, then the focus should be on those puzzles and then on branching. Just like the Stanley Parables map of choice or lack of choice map showcases really cool that or really well, where do you need content to be developed. Google, Grim Fandango, Stanley Parable, if you're making a story-driven game, how to emphasize those. The scope and size and style of game design document depends, of course, on the project. I still would say that very small games don't necessarily need game design document if the scope is small enough that a solo developer can keep everything in their mind at all times. Small games might just need the game design document and not anything else, or indeed those separate files. But all the other type of games need a lot of or appropriate amount of design documentation, and the team needs to know where to find exactly those. Action-driven games, on the other hand, should focus on the mechanics, and you should start with architecture structure when possible. So figuring out the smallest variables and which things influence that, so that programmers can start designing the code architecture. What is needed at which stage? You should paint a picture, what makes up the difficulty, progression, and so forth, even if the actual content is then elsewhere. But in the design documentation, how does damage system work? And okay, the characters have these, and these abilities, so then this is how we build difficulty or progression and so forth. So make sure that you have enemy variables on example tables and so forth. And last but not least, if you're making a content-driven or emotion-driven games, then focus on progression, focus on user experience, and focus on content progression. Those two might be different. Progression could be character progression, and content progression more of how does different levels differentiate from one another. How do we go in more epic places and so forth. And then, of course, when you start having design documentation, then you can start building tasks and asset lists, which are really awesome to do at the beginning of the development, because then you have a way of measuring the scope of the game. And in any case, don't be afraid to use spreadsheets. Those are designers' best tool. Here is on the left example how I started writing on the Company of Crimes design documentation. First, having a blowout chart of tactical gameplay, that there is units and obstacles. They have some key variables, and then what elements are the tactical gameplay done, and then that gives me good element on what else to design, how they work. And the same thing for strategy layer, so meta gameplay, what is it made of, and then what main elements are there in the game. Now, one last thing, even though it isn't necessary on game design documentation, but it's such an important feature that I want to highlight it still from the user experience. Now, the key element to any game is that game should communicate its own state, and particularly when that state changes to the player. Meaning that if in a game you shoot and someone takes a hit, that should be told to player somehow. AAA games are bad to learn from because they all feel so realistic, so it's difficult to realize that all that has been designed in. So let's say that you're making a pixel art game, then how do you make sure that shooting from a distance, that character took a damage and became aggressive. Well, a particle effect, sure. Then that showcased that, okay, it took some damage, or it was a hit, it wasn't a miss. Different particle effect for a miss and different for hit. Probably health bar appearing if it wasn't aggressive at first, but then a red health bar showcasing that it's aggressive. Preferably also some audio that, okay, now it's aggressive. It will attack you now. Or is there some other element indicating, maybe the layer underneath, even if it's a pixel art game in this example, indicating that it's now aggressive. But it can also mean things like, I'm now holding aim button and I'm in more accurate way to shoot with a bow or with a gun. So camera changes. Even if you see a screenshot, you realize that this character is now about to shoot. Or are you now in a select skill mode or whatnot? So always when the state of the game, whether it's main element, like what I as a player am about to do, or that character in the world is about to do, like, consider those. And most cases, we are building not a simulation, but fun experience. You can see easily this in action games, where for no real reason, enemies, when they become aggressive, they let out a grunt. They yell at you, or they somehow indicate that now I'm going to attack you. Because realistically, they shouldn't do that, so they could sneak up on you by secret. But from player's perspective, suddenly someone attacking me is not good. So then we as developers, we tend to highlight that, well, you were told that someone is attacking you. Because it's not fun if you couldn't prepare. So change of state. Now this villager became angry. Even if you didn't do anything, maybe you killed a villager earlier, but now they saw you, so they are stupid and yell at you, hey, you killer, and then they come at you. So there is direct ways. Those are exactly the type of things that I just explained, which player probably consciously knows that, okay, I am supposed to know those. But you should also plan subtle ways that impact the player's mood. The change of music. Oh, something dangerous is about to happen. That is one way to indicate that the state of the game changed. There is enemies nearby. Prepare for an attack. Or, like, what I love the best is at the polish state, when you're moving a cursor. Let's say you're making a tile-based game like the Company of Crime was. How do you remove the problem with that I accidentally moved to a wrong tile? Well, make barely noticeable sound cue whenever cursor moves from one tile to another. You never register it to the conscious mind, but you feel that if you're about to press the button to move there, but you just heard that, you know that, actually, I shouldn't press the button because there was that small hum sound. And since we are with the basics of user experience, few words about user interface. That's of course where player directly interacts with the game. And then user experience is how obvious the changes that how you interacted with the game are. So user experience is more, it's more of how well you're communicating things to player, not if you are. So you have to communicate things to the player, and a good user experience is just that you manage to do it really well. Now, My final advice before I open the floor for questions is how to scope the game. And I find the best practice to slice the game to small pieces on paper, on spreadsheet, on docs, Google Docs or Word document. List features, list number of units, number of levels, and once you've done that, then slice those even into smaller bits. If on the high level you are like, okay, there is battles. Well, how does that battle work? How does the damage output work? How does healing work? Is there healing? And so forth. And units, how many animations do those units need? Which animations do they need? How many objects does a level need? Rough estimates are enough. Then you can multiply that. If in one level there is 2 land types, there needs to be at least a building, for example, but made from tile sets, then you can start figuring out, okay, how many different tile sets do we need so that we can build interesting levels. And then linking these to the features that you're listing. Now, that is all. Now you can think of any questions